I just took a generic presentation and I modified a few slides.
Yes, sir.
Like I said, the main purpose is to include some links that can be helpful for you going away, to take away. So the three main topics that I have focused on based on Jared, what you had said is that we want to look at protection policies, and I'll go into that in as much depth. And honestly, when I first started over 2 years ago, it took me a while to get my head around it. So that's good. Let's spend some time there. And then threat hunting and then integrations. Okay. So here's some just general motherhood stuff, business security, enterprise security. If you want this, you can go over it afterwards. Really, I have two slides on protection policies. The first one is just highlighting the fact that there are two hierarchies that you have to consider. And then the second deck is I'll just give you some links to some documentation. And I'll share my screen and go into this, and we can go through it. JR, you can ask me specifically, what does this mean? How will it be implemented? But I'll go through it and I'll try to give you an understanding of how these two hierarchies work together, okay?
Got it.
So first of all, as a partner, you get access to policy templates. And then when you look at a specific workspace, in this case, the workspace from this screenshot is VirtueCon Global. You also get access to protection policies for that workspace, and they look very similar, but it's very important that we keep them separate because there are best practices. So let me change what I'm sharing and go to my screen. The computer that I am on here is in VirtueCon Global, the workspace. So, and I'll leave it up for a second. I know I'm sure, and I hope that you've heard about the ability to do UI customization or rebranding, right?
Correct.
Okay. I find it a useful thing to have this up so that I can see when I push out a new protection policy change, I can see that the UI gets changed if that's involved in what's being pushed out. But first of all, let's start with the workspace and the endpoint. The name of this endpoint is VM server. I have it all pinned here, so it comes up automatically. If I go to this endpoint in the management console, as you know, you can see a kind of a mirror image of what's being displayed in the management console. At the lowest level, the way that you can make changes at the absolute lowest level is to make changes on an endpoint. And again, I've done that by going to a specific endpoint. I go to a workspace, and then I go to a specific endpoint, and then I go into settings. And it shows me a slightly different interface than I see in the endpoint settings UI, but that's okay. It shows me an interface that's consistent with the rest of the management console. I muck around a fair bit, so that's why you'll see a lot of these blue dots. Whenever you see a blue dot, it tells you that the local setting has been changed from what it inherits. Okay, and I'm looking at the endpoint now, so I'm looking at the configuration on this endpoint here, and I can make any change to this endpoint, and the changes will only affect this endpoint. Okay. The problem with that, as you know, is that if you're managing more than a handful of endpoints, it becomes difficult to ensure that you have the proper configuration. And if you want to make a change in the configuration in the future, then you would have to do it device by device. So then we can go up one level and get access to the same thing, but the settings that we'll look at are not just for an endpoint, they're for multiple endpoints within a workspace. So I can do that by going to protection policies. And when I go to protection policies, first of all, you'll notice, I'll just go back to the settings here on the endpoint. And I'll just sort of highlight all of the settings. All of these settings are the same settings that you have in the end user interface, plus some additional ones. For example, content filtering. You can see whether or not it's turned on or off, but you can't configure it on the endpoint. It has to be configured through the management console. But all of these settings, almost all of these settings, are identical to what you would see in the endpoint. Here you can see that I have an administrative password set, and that's something that we always recommend.
And that the specific password we're talking about is in the protection policy that prevents the user from uninstalling.
It prevents the user from uninstalling or making changes. So if I go in and I want to try to make a change to anything, first of all, I can see that all of the configurable attributes are grayed out. And secondly, if I click on one, so
Okay.
when
How
there
did
is
you
an
bring that up?
administrative,
How
pardon
did you
me?
bring up the password?
I clicked on any setting.
Okay, copy.
So if you go anything that's, and I can do this from the main screen too, I can try to turn off a layer of protection. If you try to make any change at all, and similarly, if I go down here and I right click and I try to make a change or do an uninstall or disable for a period of time protection, it'll ask me for this password.
Got it.
Okay.
Now,
And
to the right, yeah.
it will put the this endpoint in admin mode, which means I have admin access, and I can choose the default is to stay in admin mode until I close the program or until I restart the computer. Normally, you would only do it until you close the program, which is the default. And if I enter this
By
password,
closing the program, you mean the GUI,
just close and open it up.
the
Yeah, I'll show
local
it to you.
GUI, okay, that we're looking at. Got it.
So as soon as I enter the password, now the attributes are no longer grayed out.
Got it. So this is
And
just basically a session and not a permanent.
That's right. I've escalated my privileges as long as I have the window open.
Okay.
And I can see that because there is a star here beside the user icon. And also down here in the taskbar, now there's a star in the Emsisoft shield as well. And that tells me that admin mode is on. You can see it sort of behind my oversized pointer here.
I'm familiar with this. This is the same as Bitdefender Power User.
Yeah,
okay,
and to turn it off, to revoke those privileges, I just have to close it and open it up again, and I can see that the star is gone. I can see that I can no longer make any changes, and I can see that the star is gone from the shield in the taskbar as well.
Luke, let's say JR creates an admin password for his client and JR forgets it. How would you go about recuperating that password or changing it again?
You can always go here and change it either. And again, we haven't got to protection policies yet. I'm looking at the settings for one endpoint from the management console. But if I want, I can change the password for this endpoint.
Okay.
But I actually have the password applied in a policy template that I've applied. So it's inherited. This endpoint has inherited the setting from a policy template.
Because JR had an issue once where he contacted Coar, and Coar told him because JR couldn't get in with his admin password, and Coar said,
wasn't it.
It was
the computer wouldn't go into the workspace because it was asking for a password.
Okay.
Which I have no idea what was going on there.
Yeah, I don't know
that.
I don't
Is there more
understand
than
the scenario.
one
So
password?
Well, it's maybe the username and password of when when the user signed up, he might have put in a username and password, because at the end of the day, the end user, I assume, can create a user and password when they go to their own myemsisoft.com, right?
Yeah,
Luke?
but I did everything. I created the workspace.
Okay.
I created the trial.
Okay.
I sent the installer, and it would not work.
I don't know.
It required a password. Remember, you worked on this with me,
yeah,
Mark.
Yeah.
I spent 4 to 5 hours on that computer.
That's it. And then all we did was click enter key, and then it worked. So I don't know.
Am I missing something on
I don't know
how
what was
to do
asking.
an install?
No, I mean,
Not you.
I
Luke.
can go through an installation. I can go through an installation just to show you, but it's, you know,
Okay.
basically the ideally you always use the default installer, which is a web installer,
Yeah.
rather than an MSI package, because the web installer has more intelligence and it looks to see if Emsisoft is already installed and it acts accordingly if it is.
So go to virtual. Let's go through that real quick. So go to your workspace.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, by default, all of the computers normally end up in new computers.
Yeah, you can change that. You can change that,
Right,
but
but
yeah.
I'm saying by default.
Yep.
So we never change the default so that it's the same for everybody. Now,
Okay.
when you say download and install protection back there,
Yeah.
what group?
So again, the default here will automatically add the users to the new computers group.
But now I find it interesting because I go to the new computers group.
Yeah.
And there'll be a token in virtual global default, but then you go to the group and there will be no token. So you'd think that if the token was automatically taking you into the new computers group, that it would be the same installation token here as on the previous screen.
Yeah, it's just that's just one quirk we have to accept. Like
Okay,
you
I'm
can't
just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, yeah,
So
you're absolutely
it
right.
doesn't
But
matter if I use this screen to send an installer or the new computer to send the installer. It's going to automatically go to new computer
that's right.
in either location.
The reason being that you can't have endpoints associated. I don't think. Let me just see. This device that I'm on is here. Yeah, see, you can't apply an endpoint, a device, to the root level group. It has to be a child group.
So why is it even showing devices and fooling us into thinking we have something that we don't?
It's just a quirk of the UI.
Okay, so there should be nothing behind virtual global.
Right.
So that people don't make that mistake. Okay. Now, what would be nice if new computers was called default and the previous screen would say default.
Right. Yeah. But I will point out that you can actually, here you can see that I've created multiple policy groups, right? In a hierarchy as well. And you can actually download an installer for any of these groups. And then when the installer is run, the computers will automatically get added to whatever group the installer is associated with. So I can click on this and it'll download an installer that's tokenized for this policy group. If there is not a token, like if I go down here, I suspect there might not be a token down here. I can create a new token, and and then it'll give me the ability to download a tokenized installer.
Yes. Now, we had an issue previously where we started automatically creating a brand new token to get past that.
Okay, so let's look at this hierarchy again. I'm going to go back to VirtueCon Global. So now I'm back to the workspace where I can close this for now. The workspace where this device is.
Yes.
I can look at the device and I can look at protection settings for this device. And again, just because it's a demo machine, ignore all of the blue dots.
Copy.
But I can make any changes I want here, but I typically do not want to do that, right?
Right.
Because it's a management nightmare. So the next possibility is to go to the workspace and protection policies. And now I have moved this endpoint to be in VPs and above. So if I click on VPs and above, the policy group, here I can see VM server is the name of this machine. Now, VM server is a child of executives, which is a child of the root level. So I can go to and I can see that if I scroll down, there are no blue circles. So there is nothing different at this level than there is at this level. So if I click on executives and I scroll down, again, I'm looking for the blue dots. There are none. So executives is exactly the same as what it inherits from its parent. So if I go to the parent, here is where I see, number one, the template has been applied. And here is where I've made the change or any changes that are specific to this workspace. I have not. For this workspace, I've accepted all of the changes, configuration settings that are defined in a template. Okay.
Got it.
So you see the inheritance. If I make a change now, let's start at the top. I can make a change to the name of this service. So it says VirtueCon Best. I can scroll down here. Oh, that's done in the template. I'm sorry. What can I do? I can turn off behavior blocker at the workspace layer, and it'll break that connection to what it inherited. And that should get pushed out in a few seconds.
Is there a visual knowing it's pushed?
Well, normally
yeah, behavior blocker would turn off. Copy.
It'll turn off, but normally, and this should have changed by now. There may be something at a lower level that's causing it not to change. So
okay, but I understand that. I'm clear on that. Okay.
Okay. Now, what we recommend is if it makes logical sense to group the users within a company into different policy groups, then you can do it. And by logical sense, I mean, do different users have different requirements? For example, content filtering. You may want to turn on or off content filtering depending upon the user or their role. If not, you don't have to create policy groups. You can apply everything to the top level.
I'm completely familiar with that, and I have set default template that with all the best practices that then we use that default for every new workspace.
Perfect.
So I've got that down and I've taught that. Okay.
Okay. So, and then you will have seen this. I can change this. So here I am at a grandchild, a child root level. If I want to, I can change this template to be my root level default, which is named after my fictional MSP.
Got it.
And now you can see that should get pushed out in about 2 seconds, roughly, right?
Yes, sir.
The difference is that at this top level, I don't have UI customizations.
Got it.
Okay, but then if I wanted to, I can go back to executives, which is, between the grandchild where this computer is and the root, and I can apply a different policy template, and I'll see that get pushed out in, again, a couple of seconds. Okay, so you can override what it inherits either by choosing a new template or by changing individual settings. Ideally, you make as few changes to individual settings as possible. Okay.
Right.
I'm just going to go and check something because this might actually give you some good insight here. I'm just going to check this here. Here, VM server, you saw all the blue dots.
Right.
And this is showing me that I have 51 edits. So that means this endpoint has broken that connection with its configuration setting from its hierarchy 51 times. That's what all those blue dots were.
Got it.
So if I go into protection policies for this endpoint, that's what all these blue dots are. So I can go through and change these individually, or I can go back to the workspace and I can say, where is that? Reset policy as a bulk action. And I'll choose these two because they have the most changes. Again, I mess about when I apply that, it'll reestablish that connection to its inherited settings.
Is that the push icon at the top?
Yeah, it's the bulk action icon.
Oh, okay, got it.
So there are two ways that you can do bulk actions, by the way. Well, actually three ways. You can do it from here, where you can select it to multiple, or I should say remote actions. You can do it from here, where you can actually apply it to multiple endpoints at once. And you can see that those edits have now gone away. So that correction has changed. You can also do bulk activities from here for any given endpoint, right?
Got it.
Or you can go to the endpoint itself and you can do some things from the endpoint view. So down here, there are quick tasks. They're not all the same functionality, but you can initiate some activities remotely, like uninstall. That's a big thing that came out, I think, late last year that was that we didn't have support for. But now we can actually do, if I go back to the workspace, remove protection, which is what was there before, removes the license from the endpoint. So it doesn't uninstall the software, but now uninstall actually removes the software remotely.
So
Okay.
what are those four icons? The last one is bulk.
Yeah, this is download. So it'll download a spreadsheet of all of the devices in this workspace. This lets me select which columns are being displayed. So you can completely customize this display. Like you can click on anything and rearrange it. You can choose what's being displayed and what's being hidden. And then if you wish, you can actually save different views. So, you know, which devices are not managed, which devices have never been scanned. You can have different views by saving the current view once you have it as you wish. And the view, what it's showing me in the columns now, these columns are specific to endpoints, but you have the same capabilities. If I go back to the main screen for workspaces, I can select what's being shown. So if I want to show the license, I can click on license and it's added over here. If I want it over here, I can drag it.
Got it.
And then if I wish, I can save this view as well.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay, I'm clear on that. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we've talked about, I'm going to go back here for a second. We've talked about the hierarchy, going back to protection policies.
Right.
From the endpoint to a policy group. And normally, you know, there's only one unless you configure multiple policy groups, but it's possible that the configuration inheritance will go through multiple levels of policy groups. And then it'll go to a template if you have a template assigned. So the way that you configure templates as a partner, there's a different way for non-partners, which is a lot more onerous, by the way. So I'll just skip that. Is under the partner section, policy templates. And again, you can see that we can set up a hierarchy. And again, the child templates will inherit all of the configurations from the parent. And then you can apply changes. If you apply changes, then the blue dots will appear. In this case, I'm at the root level. And why do I see these there, because either I broke that relationship with the default setting, in this case, because I'm at the root level, what it inherits is the default for Emsisoft, or because I actually turned both of these on and the default setting is for them to be off.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay.
And again, I can go down here and I can make changes to any different, well, let's see here. So here I have a few things changed. I changed the disk quota from the default, which is I think 30% down to 5%. And I made some changes with the user interface at the bottom. Similarly with VirtueCon as a different policy template, I made some different UI customizations. So when I apply these, in this case, Enterprise Gold has been applied, and I can see that here. It's been applied to VirtueCon Global, to the executives policy group. So I can see where it has been applied here.
Copy.
Okay. Now these, as we were saying, if I want to change this to be what it inherits from its parent, I just have to click on the blue dot, and it'll say we'll revert it to its parent policy and reestablish that connection. So when the parent policy changes, then the policy template, like if I have, in this case, I have Enterprise Gold, I know is applied to the work group, the policy group that includes this computer. If I make a change to Enterprise Gold, it will reflect in this computer. So I can change, here I can see the brand name is ContosoSec. I can change this to just say Gold. And again, I'm in the policy template, but as soon as I see the blue ribbon indicating that there's communication with the cloud, there it goes.
Yep.
This will get updated with the new branding.
Great.
Now, I can make the change in the parent policy, but it won't be reflected because this shows that the relationship has been broken with the parent policy.
Copy.
So I can go here and make a change. It's broken. That connection is broken unless I reestablish it.
Copy.
Okay. So does that give you a decent understanding of how policy templates work?
Absolutely. That's beautiful.
In the presentation, I've just included some links to, number one, to the online documentation. Number two, in sales assets, there are a bunch of videos that are actually fairly useful, and they're short. They're, and I say that I'm biased because I created a bunch of them. But they're short. They're like 4 to 5 minutes each, and they're topic based. And there's one for templates for policies and reports. So I'll share this document with you when we're done.
Copy.
Okay, so where are we? Next one, I put threat hunting next.
Great.
So let's take a quick look at that. Threat hunting, our threat hunting implementation, the page is only activated for enterprise users. It uses an open source framework called OS Query, and I've included a link to the OS Query schema page. And I've also included a link to the Computer Security and Infrastructure Security Agency in the United States. They have a page, a document on using indicators of compromise for incident response. This is just like background material for you.
Copy.
If you want to know more about OS Query, there's also an OS Query Slack channel. And you can also, and we'll actually look at a couple of MITRE ATT&CK techniques and see how they can provide some guidance into what you can be looking for threat hunting. Okay, I think that's all I have here, but what I'll do is jump to the endpoint and we'll look at some threat hunting examples, okay?
Yes, sir.
So I'll go back to here and close down this. And threat hunting had a significant change recently, and that is number one, there is now under partners, there's a global threat hunting. So that means that you can define threat hunting queries and you can apply them globally across all of your workspaces. But let's look at an individual workspace right now to start with. If I go to VirtuCon Global, again, I can go to anyone in this case. Let's go to threat hunting. I mean, let me start with device test because it's empty. This is what threat hunting looks like now. Before, it would automatically just take you to this page. Okay, but it doesn't now. It takes you to this page. And what is the difference? The difference is that threat hunting allows you to query an endpoint as if it's a SQL database. And that's the power of OS query. So if I go to a live query and I see down here it's powered by OS query, I always point out this. There's a link here that'll take you to the OS query page, and here's the schema. So I assume you're familiar with SQL databases.
To some degree.
Okay, this page gives you a list of all of the tables and what columns and which operating systems these tables apply to. So I can see that some are Mac OS, some are Linux, and many are going to be Windows as well. Basically, for different, so let me find one, certificates. So here's one that applies to all three. I can query an endpoint looking for any of these columns, any of these records on an endpoint if I'm doing an investigation. Okay, so what does that mean? Let me go back to here, and I'll go back to the main page, and I'll do a reset here. Because this allows me to, I only have one device online, which is that virtual machine. I can now query it using this SQL-like language and using the tables that are defined in that schema that the link is available here. We provide about three dozen different queries out of the box. So for example, what ports are open, or what services are running, or what's in the startup folder. If I just type in startup, what are in the startup folder? I can run that query and it automatically populates it. You can create your own queries as well. So you would use the schema, you can type in a query. Anytime I use SQL, it always takes me 10 times to get the syntax correct. But now I can run the query, and this is looking for all the files in the startup folders. I can see that it's running in real time. It's gone to the virtual machine, which is here. One of these two, I can't remember which.
Okay.
This one, device test. So it ran against this virtual machine. It did the query and it found out that there's one thing in the startup folder. Or if I want, I can query and say what ports are open, or I can look for specific registry changes, or I can look for specific files in other locations. It's incredibly powerful, and its purpose is to allow you to specifically look for indicators of compromise, indications that something malicious is taking place. So here I can see here all the open ports. That's good. I don't know. I don't think I have anything that I'm looking for on this specific virtual machine. But let us look at some instances where you would start to look to use threat hunting. If I go to incidents, and again, I'll pull up my virtual machine because this is device test is this virtual machine. And I'm looking at device test. I'm looking at incidents. I ran a couple incidents this morning. First of all, I'm glad you asked me that. I'm glad you said you want to see a rollback, because I did a file encryption this morning. I ran some ransomware. I turned off behavior blocker, and I ran some ransomware, and I encrypted some files. Typically, when we do this, it can take 15 minutes for the process to complete. But let's look at this for a second. First of all, let me click on this incident. I can see that there is, again, if I go to the endpoint for a moment, the layers of protection include web protection, file guard, behavior blocker, and with EDR, we also have behavior AI, which is an additional layer of monitoring, right? It monitors for things over and above what are monitored by the things being monitored by the other protection layers. And I can see that EDR detected something here, suspicious file creation patterns, and it gives me a link to the technique. So if I click on this link, it will show me that it's the specific technique that was evidenced was data encryption, and that's exactly what I did. Right on this endpoint, I ran this malware and I encrypted the files that exist within this directory. These are PDF files that have been encrypted. If I go back to the MITRE link, if I know specifically the tactic, in this case, it's 1486. If I scroll down, it will give me some examples. It will also give me detection. So mitigations, how can I protect against it? Detection, what should I look for? And this will tell me things that I can start to look for if I suspect that a threat actor is using this specific technique, which is encryption. Okay. So, it doesn't say look for this exact file. It says that you should look for these types of things. So you need some additional knowledge to really understand what you should be looking for. If I go back to the management console now, and if I go back to the incidents for this workspace, I actually ran, this was malware that I executed. I turned off, first I ran file scanner, and then I turned off file scanner and I ran it again. And I have it here as these encrypted or these compressed and password protected files. This is malware that I downloaded from VirusTotal. So here you can see for this incident that it was detected by multiple layers of protection. First of all, file guard, it caught it first, and here is where it caught it in the timeline, and it terminated it right away. It saw it and it terminated it. And then what I did is I turned off file guard and I restored the file and I ran it again. And the second time I ran it, behavior blocker caught it. So again, if I'm looking at my endpoint, I'm seeing that, I went through and I turned off file guard and then I let behavior blocker catch it and it caught it as well. And it tells me exactly the patterns that are being seen with this malware. The other thing that this incident gives me is a link to VirusTotal. So whereas with the other incident, it was triggered by our behavior AI, which is our MITRE EDR layer, this was triggered by behavior blocker, and it gives me a link to VirusTotal that's associated with the hash for this file. If I click on this link, again, one of the purposes of EDR is to provide you with third-party information as well as local log information to make informed decisions about what's happening. So before I looked at my attack, it provided me with a link to the specific technique that was being executed. This time, the file I can see, if I go to down here, I can see that 61 of 69 vendors. If you're not familiar with VirusTotal,
we're 100% familiar with it.
Okay, if it is green on VirusTotal and it's considered a quote unquote false positive, is there a spot where you can report it as a false positive or do you have to send an email or whatever?
Well, you can report it from here.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that. Sorry.
Great. We like that.
I actually did this. I did this the other day because I for some of the software that I was running that I installed for this session, I got a false positive. I installed Wireshark, which wants all sorts of privileged access to the network, and it raised a false positive. So I raised a ticket and it was whitelisted. So I mean, it goes to our lab team. I talked to them. I could call them out and guess who it went to. I might be wrong or I might be right.
Okay.
No, but we would want that detection to occur, because what if a bad actor installed it and we didn't know? Great, look, who the hell
There
did
is
that,
always, yeah, especially with supply chain attacks, right? And this was the case with MoveIt back in, I think, March.
right?
Or March of last year. It was getting all sorts of detections, and people are saying, no, that's a signed file, that's okay. And in fact, it was a supply chain attack, and a portion of the code for that service was compromised. So there was always going to be a first detection. So just because VirusTotal says it's 100% green, that's not necessarily, that's an indicator, it's not a guarantee. Okay, so we're talking about VirusTotal. The other thing that VirusTotal can do is under behavior, it can show you things that you can look for as indicators of compromise. If you want to, you can start to search for some of the files that are written or deleted or copied. You can start to look for some of the indicators of compromise, whether they be registry entries or what have you, that are defined in VirusTotal.
Nice. Okay. I was not familiar with that function. That's great.
So now, in order to take advantage of that, I go back to threat hunting and I go back to a live query, and you have to start to know what the schema is in order to do registry searches. So if I go here and I type in a search on registry, it'll probably come, has 41 different registry entries. So OS query registry. There's the registry entry there. Let's see who that's for. So that's for Windows. If I want to query the Windows registry, this is the table I would use, and I would use this to construct a query in threat hunting here. Okay. Okay, that's part of threat hunting, which is the ability to do a live query to look for something. There is a new set of functionality that came out just recently. I believe it was this year, which is, and if I go back to threat hunting by clicking on the breadcrumb trail, you can now create reports. Okay. And I'm going to show you in incidents what that means. If I go to incidents, I see the layers of detection and protection. Behavior blocker, got it. Web protection, got it. File scanning, that's our file guard. Behavior AI, we talked about that. By the way, the last time I looked, which was last week, I think we monitor for over 1,800 different MITRE tactics, techniques, and procedures. This one layer protection monitors for 1,800 different activities. And then we also have threat hunting here. So it's another layer of detection. And what does that mean?
Sorry, just interrupt you there. The behavior AI is only available in the enterprise edition, or is that the same one for the business?
It's the same one for the business, but the log retention is shorter for business. And business does not have threat hunting.
It doesn't. Okay, perfect. Got it.
So, and I don't want to get into the debate that JR was having with Davlat earlier.
Davlat, yeah.
It's like without threat hunting and with limited log retention is business EDR. While it has EDR functionality, it's an EDR light, but it's not. Our complete EDR implementation is enterprise because it has both of those. And with that, I'll end that discussion.
Okay, JR?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, cool. So now I'm going back to my VirtueCon workspace because I want to look at threat hunting here because I know I have a number of reports configured. So, and we saw that there's now a level of detection in incidents, and those detections take place when you have reports defined, right? So here I say I'm doing a daily report every day at 5 o'clock, every day at 4 in the morning, another one every day at 4 in the morning, looking for differences in host files, in installed programs, or in users. So if another program is installed, I will get an alert. I will get an incident. If my host file is changed or if a new user is added, I will have an incident generated, and I can go and look at that. There we go. So here I was doing a bunch of installs and uninstalls because I was preparing to show you integrations. And here is a report where I can see that there were a bunch of installed program changes on these two machines in yesterday. Right? It'll show me in green what has been added. It'll show me in red what's been deleted. And it'll show me, of course, what device it's on. So this is another way that you can use threat hunting to provide additional insight into your endpoints. You can monitor things that you're not quite sure about. You know, is there something funny going on? You can monitor users, you can monitor directories, you can monitor registry entries. And then we will, you know, if you have this configured as a threat hunting report, you will get these updates every day. Okay.
Man, that is really powerful. If you
It's
thought something
incredibly
was going
powerful.
on, you could turn that on and know a shitload.
You have to really know Windows well to take full advantage of it. But even like I don't know Windows terribly well, but I can go in and, you know, these are easy to configure. These were I configured these using the available query, which is available out of the box. But you can, of course, you start to see the full power when you start to add your own queries. So for example, the first one I did, because I was asked 2 years ago, can I see what patches have been applied? So I can look at, again, this is workspace by workspace, but I can also do it across all of my workspaces. I want to make sure that all of my customers are up to date with their patches. So I can just run a query. And again, I'm doing this in real time, but you can also do a report that will do the same thing. And it'll go through and it'll verify all the Windows patches that have been applied. So do they have the latest security updates? Things like that. And if I only want to see VMware or VM server, sorry, then I can look at this machine only. Okay. There's a lot there in threat hunting.
I agree.
So let's,
Okay. I think we should move on.
yeah. How are we doing for time? Oh, we're over time, but that's, I'm fine.
What
if you are.
about, can you roll back those files for us?
Yeah. Yeah. So
'Cause
let's do that.
That would be neat to see.
Let's do two things. Yeah, it'd be really neat. I just want to,
Do you have anything scheduled now, Luke, or you're good?
I'm good. I'm good. I have as much time as you need.
Cool.
What I want to do though is I will show you the rollback first because that just takes a second. We talked about this. The next two pages, pardon me. As soon as I do the rollback, I will also talk about integrations, okay?
Got it.
Are you familiar with SIM systems, depending on who you are, they pronounce
Yes,
it
I
differently.
have never set one up.
Okay.
But I
It's
have
a log
a
aggregator,
little
right?
bit of knowledge about what they are. I do have some users in Bitdefender that have done that, but I'm seeing it as very rare.
Okay. I will show you the integration in real time. And then, of course, it's going to change depending on the requirements of whatever system they're trying to integrate to. Some systems, like I went through a bunch of SIEM systems last year. Some of them require local agents in order to collect files locally. Some of them don't. We have support for 2 different protocols for sending logs to an upstream system. We have syslog and we have webhooks. I'll go through syslog. I haven't set up webhooks, but it's just a different protocol. And just keep in mind that what we're dealing with is, in this case, the SIEM system that I'm going to demonstrate is actually, I'm just running an application on my local machine. So in this case, the customer workspace and the SIEM systems are co-located, but they have to go through a cloud in order to communicate with each other. Sometimes, and quite often actually, the SIM system will actually be in the cloud. So there's no local configuration like this to set up. In this case, there is. In this case, the setup is my devices. I have a SIM system set up. It happens to be co-located with my devices. And in order to get the SIM system to receive and send, to receive information from Emsisoft, number one, I configured that in the management console. And number two, that information originates from the cloud and it gets sent to wherever it's collected. In this case, a machine on my network. I have 2 routers set up, so I had to set up 2 sets of port forwarding rules. Okay. So I'll show you that. I'll go through that process.
All right.
And it shouldn't take long. Back to the screen. Let us look at rollback. So, like I said, we actually have an application that will encrypt files. We can't share it. If the reasons aren't obvious, I'll try to make them obvious, because it says Emsisoft on it. And if there's an application that says Emsisoft that's in the wild encrypting files, it looks very bad for the industry. But I ran it to encrypt the files in this folder. And this is the workspace device test. So if I go back to my management console, and if I rearrange these cunningly, let me move this up a bit, over. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. Oh, crap. What happened? Oh, that was my virtual machine. Oh, that's really annoying. Okay, I'll do it this way. And I go to my workspace. Which is, go to workspaces, device test. And I go to incidents. And I saw this before. Here is the ransomware that I executed. So this is actual malware. This is Phobos, and I ran this. I ran the ransomware at 10:24 this morning, and I ran this at 7:24 this morning, and I ran the actual malware at 7:40 this morning, and it was caught and terminated by behavior block, first by FileGuard and then by behavior blocker. But if I look at this ransomware execution, the incident shows me that there is suspicious file activity. And that's when we looked at that, it said file encryption. And in fact, I know that some files have been encrypted. So if this happens with your customer, first of all, it has to be configured. That's quite straightforward. They need to have enterprise. Rollback is only available with enterprise. And you have to have rollback turned on. And the default, you can configure these settings, but you can play with how much disk quota is put aside and how long the files are saved for. It basically saves a rolling window. It does not use volume shadow copies. We create our own file structure.
So is the maximum only 72 hours?
I believe so. Yeah. Yeah, because it's a rolling window. It's not a backup, right? It's a rollback feature.
Got it.
Let me just hide this.
Need to set up this percent and roll back.
Oh yeah, I was going to show this.
Interval. Okay. Making notes.
Yeah.
All right,
now,
got it.
It does not use volume shadow copy.
Correct.
So it creates its own file structure, and it uses the same Emsisoft protection to protect that file structure. So if I look at my C drive, I currently have it to show hidden files because, you know, we're always looking at log data, but here's the Emsisoft backup. You need privileges in order to view it. And obviously you can't delete anything, but here are the backup files that are created. So this is, like I said, this is a moving window, right? It's like first in, first out in terms of what is maintained here. And it maintains these local images of files before any applications are allowed to change them or able to change them. So when it was detected that encryptions were taking place, those files that were being encrypted and deleted were captured in that local backup. So if I now go back to incidents and go back to ransomware, and I can see it here. In order to do a rollback, it normally after the event will take 15 minutes, maybe longer, before this rollback will appear. But once it's appeared, you can click on it. It'll tell me that there's 6 file changes. The 6 file changes are that 3 files have been deleted and 3 encrypted files have been created. So it's going to back out of all of this. And when I click on apply, start your stopwatch. Oh,
Got
it's
it.
done. That's all there is to it.
Wow, that's
Nice.
cool.
Very nice.
That's really cool.
Okay. If you wanted to show it, what you can try doing is, I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, first of all.
No,
When
but we
I
could
ran
take
that,
it. You said you're going to make this a video, right? So we can actually take whatever
Yeah.
clip you just did. And what do you
Yeah.
use, by the way, to record the webinar that we're doing now?
I'm just recording it in Zoom.
Ah, okay, cool. Perfect.
So you can
Okay.
download it. You can download it as an MP3 or whatever.
Okay, perfect. And then we can edit it, I guess.
MP4. Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's an
then, okay.
MP4 file, I think.
Cool.
Okay. So that's enough with this. Now let's look at the last thing, which is integrations exist for every workspace under workspace settings. And just as I scroll down, just as you can have email notifications whenever certain events happen. So I have email notifications going to me, and you can configure them to be sent either as it happens or at the end of the day. And if I click on this, you see this, you have the ability to configure this when you create a workspace, or you can do it after the workspace is created by going to the settings for that workspace. You specify what events. Some events are fairly benign, right? Like I said, we track over 1,800 different MITRE events. So, and a MITRE event is not necessarily a malicious incident. In fact, in most cases, it's not malicious. It's context dependent. Sometimes it may be. So it's like, think of it as logs. Why do you keep logs? Most of the time, 99.9% of the time and higher, the logs will never be looked at. But the one time you want to look at them, it matters. But you don't need to receive emails every time a MITRE event is triggered, because they get triggered a lot. Similarly, a scan without findings, you probably don't want to receive an email as it happens, okay? So you can configure, I get these at the end of the day, I get them as they happen. But if you have an upstream system, then you can also send those events via an integration. So we talked about a SIEM system quickly, security information and event management. And basically, it's a log aggregator that prevents you with information about activity taking place on a bunch of different systems. It could be an intrusion detection system. It could be endpoint protection. It could be EDR. It could be a combination of these and more. And in order to accomplish this, I have, first of all, I've installed Wireshark, which is just a packet sniffer. So I installed it for troubleshooting because anytime you run, you try to do API connections between two different software packages. In my experience, it's going to require some troubleshooting. I have this set up to capture only packets on a certain port. The other thing that I have set up here is an application that is a log aggregator. It's Kiwi syslog server. It basically, you can send logs to it from any one of a number of sources. It's not a SIEM system, but it's a log aggregator. So I can use that as a destination for me to send my events information upstream, okay? In order to do that, I would add an integration. I'm going to specify all of these. I don't want to change it. because I want all of this information to get there. I'm going to use syslog because that's what this application uses. Webhooks would be similar, right? It'll have slightly different structure, but it's, you know, the same sort of thing. It's an API. This is the free version of this tool that I'm using. So it does not support secure connections. So I'll turn off transport layer security. The data format. So we support 2 different data formats. And again, this is going to be dependent upon the receiving end. What can they support? And then finally, we have to send it to a specific port. So if I look at this software here, if I look at the setup, if I scroll down, it's currently listening on TCP port 1468. Okay. This software also, because it's the free version, has a limited number of sources that it will listen to. So there are 4 cloud IP addresses for Emsisoft that you would have to configure. I can send this to you offline if you need. There are 4 IP addresses that have to be configured that would be potentially sending data to this endpoint. Okay. So what was that? 1468 is the port. Syslog, you know, good practices never do this in a non-secure connection, but this is only for demo purposes using free software. So I'm just going to click on OK. A host name is required. So my external IP address, actually I haven't. I've configured port forwarding on one firewall. The other one is not done. So when I say OK, and if I go into this, this is a really easy way to tell what your connectivity is doing. If I click on send, I should get an immediate confirmation up here, and I'm not. And I know that I'm not because I have my port forwarding, and I just got an email notification, by the way, because I created this integration. I'm going to go into my firewall and turn on turn the port forwarding on. So I'm just going to log in. I know that you can't see it. I'm turning on port forwarding. Now it's done. And now immediately you see that I'm receiving packets, and I see that I have a successful connectivity. So before, I have the packet sniffer, which is listening on this specific port. I can see the source and destination IP addresses before, and you know, this is going to be, you'll get these with any new software that you're integrating. I was seeing the packets coming through in the Wireshark, but I wasn't seeing them come through here. And that's because as freeware, this specific package makes me enter the source IP addresses that are sending the data, and I hadn't done that. Okay. Anyways, I now have connectivity. I can go here and I can send a test, and I can see them come through, and I can start to do configuration changes, and I can see those messages come through, and I do. Okay. That is the integration.
And this is also all good for the ones that are on the MSP monthly stuff?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's just a licensing issue.
That's it. It's just yearly versus monthly, right?
Yeah, it doesn't, as long as it's enterprise, it's identical. The functionality is identical.
Okay. Okay.
I think you have answered all of my questions.